This video is going to help you understand what could you qualify for from a business acquisition standpoint. Most people go into this transaction not knowing what kind of business to look for, how much they could qualify, how does the process even work. For this video, I'm going to focus on you and what makes you a qualified buyer and what a bank is going to look at when qualifying you to be approved for a loan. One of my favorite calls as an SBA lender is the intro call. It's the person that calls me and says, Glenn, we want to buy a business. We have no idea where to begin. I like to call this the light bulb call because after this call, I hope that that light bulb goes off in their head and they can start looking for business and know exactly what they potentially could qualify for. This video is going to focus on the 5 things that I think are the most important to remember when you're on your search to buy a business. The first one is equity injection requirements. With any transaction that involves buying a business, there is an equity injection requirement. So what is that? Now, the SBA defines equity injection as 10% of the total project cost. So let's dig into that a little bit. So total project cost is not just the business you're buying. It's the business you're buying, plus any working capital, plus the fees associated with that transaction. And that could be SBA fees or the due diligence fees that the bank has to do to make sure that you're getting a clean business that's being represented accurately by the seller. So let's work through an example of what the equity injection might be for a business for sale for $500,000. So let's say you're buying a business that's for sale for $500,000. Let's say you're going to build in $50,000 of working capital. Think of working capital as cash back that you get at closing post-transaction. Now on top of that, let's just say there's $10,000 in SBA and due diligence fees. The total project cost in this scenario is $560,000. So 10%, $56,000. So when you're looking to find a budget, consider that 10% calculation as the minimum. Also with equity injection, the bank's going to want to know where it's going to come from, right? Is it coming from your checking, savings? Are you rolling it over from a retirement account? Are you getting an investor to help you out? Are you borrowing money from family and friends? So the source of that equity injection is really important. So that's another piece that you got to keep in mind. Where's the money coming from? Now going back to that 10%, it's not always going to be your responsibility to bring in that 10%. And we'll dig into that in another episode, but seller financing is also a big piece of this. There's scenarios where you can actually bring in less than 10% if the seller is willing to finance a portion of that transaction. Last thing to remember with equity injection is you got to remember what your budget is. A bank typically is not going to lend to you if you're going to be emptying your bank account to buy a business. So if the equity injection is $100,000 and you have $105,000 in total in your bank account, probably not going to be ideal for a bank to lend you that money, knowing that you're only going to have about $5,000 reserves. So the first thing you need to do is establish a budget. The second thing to keep in mind is management experience, right? You're looking to buy a business. This is a living, breathing entity, and you're going to be taking over. One thing the bank is always going to look at is look at your resume, right? What kind of experience do you have? What kind of management experience do you have? Do you have direct industry experience? Is this an industry you've been working for, or will you be brand new into this industry? Now, you don't have to actually have direct industry experience to be approved, but they want to say you have applicable management experience. And so one of the things that you're going to have to do during the application process is provide your resume, your background, put in writing why you think this is a good fit. Obviously, you're interested in this business for a reason, so express that. Why is this a job that you feel like you can take on and be successful? So management experience is always going to be looked at, and it's always going to be part of the decision process. So remember, you've got to be present. This is local active ownership. The SBA loan program is meant for somebody who wants to buy a business and be actively involved. It's a very important detail. Other key things to remember, does the business have licenses? How's that going to work post-sale? Is the license going to come with you? What's the process? What does that look like? So think about your trade businesses, your plumbing, your HVAC. Typically, the owner has the license. So keep in mind, how's that license going to be transferred over? A key detail in these acquisitions. Another key detail that you have to explain during this process is if you're currently employed, will you be keeping your job or are you going to be leaving? If you're keeping your job, be prepared to have to explain how you're going to do both. If your current job requires you to be in an office from 9 to 5 and you're buying a business that also requires you to be there from 9 to 5, you really have to explain how that works. Again, this is a program designed for active ownership. And so while you can do 2 jobs at once, be prepared to have to convince a credit department that you can. The last thing I'm going to talk about, which is the most important, is cash flow. SBA 7A loan program at its very core is a cash flow program. The business has to demonstrate that can afford the loan that you're about to take on to buy it. So what is cash flow? Cash flow is the money the business makes that will allow you to pay back the debt. Now, cash flow can look different from business to business. Obviously, the business is going to show net income on a tax return, but then there's eligible add backs. Think interest, depreciation, owner salary. That's an important add back for cash flow. It depends whether you, the buyer, are going to need to take a salary or not. If you're not, owner salary becomes an add back. If you're going to be quitting your job, then we're going to need to factor in what your salary needs to be to pay your bills, your mortgage, your car loans. So there's some calculations that have to be down there. Ultimately, the business has to show it can afford this loan, or else the deal won't go through. So remember, cash flow is king for a business acquisition. And you can't just take the word of a broker. You really have to dig in the numbers and make sure that the add backs that they have are valid add backs. And the lender will help do this calculation as well. So in conclusion, I hope this helps a little bit to understand what you might be able to qualify for, what makes you a strong candidate when you're looking to acquire a business. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Until the next video, class dismissed. Thank you for watching this episode of SBA University. Hopefully you found this episode helpful. If you need to get a hold of me directly, I'll leave my email address down in the description. Be on the lookout as I will be releasing new lessons every week to help you in your SBA journey. Thanks.